get my technology up and running. Perfect. Hey everyone, welcome and thank you for taking the time to be with us again today. It's been an absolute pleasure to be here speaking with you. I do appreciate the opportunity, and I'm excited to give you guys some tools for my own learning throughout navigating interview processes and recruiting processes that hopefully you can take away from this webinar and can help assist you in your job search and overall career progression. So this is part 3 of a 3-part series titled The Building Blocks of a Successful Job Application. Today, our focus is going to be on understanding the importance of and kind of perfecting the art of interviewing. So today is about how you've gone through all the processes, you've built up your resume, you've networked, recruited, you've got an opportunity to interview for a job that you really, really want. Now, how do you go land that and clinch it? This is kind of the final step. So before we get started, a quick background on myself. My name is Omar Kasimlaka, as Sonia mentioned. I currently work as an investment associate with a fund in San Francisco called Malrock Capital. Malrock is a real estate private equity fund that invests in real estate across the country. I'm originally from Toronto, grew up attending Upper Canada College, proceeded to do my undergraduate degree at NYU Stern, where I studied finance and real estate. And prior to my current role, I was an investor with Sterling Organization, a retail-focused real estate investment company down in West Palm Beach, Florida, that invests in kind of retail shopping centers. So that's a quick background on myself, but let's dive into the interview. So what have we talked about so far? In today's world, in today's job market, particularly after COVID, when you have a lot of new entrants into the job market, it's becoming increasingly competitive with a ton of people from diverse, unique backgrounds, all of whom are well qualified. You need to find a way to stand out during a recruiting process, whatever the job may be. And depending on the industry that you're trying to break into, you could be competing with 100 other people, 500 other people, in some cases in highly coveted, competitive, lucrative industries, thousands of people for a select number of jobs. And so as a result, it is important to try and stand out at every stage of the application process to maximize your chances. So in our first session, we talked about the resume and how really that's your first impression, and it's the basis for any successful job application. It's the first thing any recruiter or headhunter or human resources kind of screener will see about you. We spoke about the do's and don'ts of resume building and kind of the best practices. We then spent a session on networking and how to take action and take initiative to get your foot in the door once you have this presentable resume. We talked about the best things you can do to kind of get your name out in the industry, form connections for today, but also how networking today, even if there's no kind of immediate opportunity on the horizon, can pay dividends, a couple of years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, because that's how networking works. Opportunities are found through people, not through job portals or not through the computer. So it's a key point to remember. Today, however, we're going to assume that all of that has gone well, and now we're at the point of the interview. So how are we going to round out that puzzle, prepare for, and ace an interview? And remember, an interview is an opportunity for you to showcase who you are, your personality, and your experience today. So it's a great opportunity for you to clinch, a highly coveted position that you seek. So let's get right into it. Generally in interviews, you'll find that the questions are bucketed within two main groups, right? You have the behavioral, more qualitative type questions, and then based on the industry that you're in, you could get more technical questions. For example, if you're trying to get into the medical or engineering field or the legal field, or the finance field, you'll have more specific industry type questions. So we'll go through how to prepare for behavioral questions and then and get into some specifics that are more kind of open-ended and applicable to a wide variety of industries. And then we'll go through a kind of a general framework for how to prepare for technical questions, obviously keeping in mind that this changes industry to industry and sort of one size doesn't really fit all when it comes to technical preparation. So a general framework for behavioral questions. Now, behavioral questions are questions that the interview asks to try and get an understanding of who you are, what your experiences are to date, and how you react or handle yourself in certain situations. It could be something as simple as tell me about a time you worked in a team, or it could be something a little bit more precarious and complicated, like tell me about a time when you faced an internal conflict or pushback in a work situation, and how did you deal with it? Or you had a conflict with a coworker, how did you resolve that conflict? So, you can go from very kind of, walk in the park kind of responses, or you can get questions that are a little bit more, I guess, strenuous to kind of navigate through. So essentially a general framework you can use to answer these kind of questions. Now, the two big mistakes when answering these questions are that you fail to use anecdotes or stories to support your points, and that you don't structure your answers properly and you kind of go on a bit of a ramble. So with the first one, why are anecdotes important? Well, in an interview, remember, it's a conversation. And so what resonates the most in dialogue, in a conversation that you're having between two people? It's stories. It's something, a story is something that can make you be memorable to an interviewer, and it can resonate, and it can help you navigate answering the question. It's a great way to draw on your previous experience and try and sort of present that to the interviewer to help them understand how you think and how you go about handling yourself in certain situations. And structurally, it's important to have a framework with which you explain the story, because if you don't, you can get on a ramble, you could lose track of time, you could speak for too long of a time or too short. And so it's important to practice and have a general framework so that the interviewer can follow and be clear and understand how you went about navigating a certain situation. There are countless qualitative questions. I just threw out a few, but there are tons of others, and there really is no way to prepare for all of them. So how do you go about preparing for these kind of questions when you could have anything thrown at you? I like to prepare stories, 5 or 6, that are different and unique from each other, that can be molded or worked on the fly to fit the question that you're asked. And you can adapt them as necessary for anything that comes your way. For example, tell me about a time you showed leadership. Can also be a response to that question can also be, what is your proudest moment? Or what are your biggest strengths? Or what would your friends say about you? If you have a story prepared for any one of those, on the fly, you'd be able to navigate or adapt that story to fit those questions. Similarly, on the other side of the spectrum, you could have a story about your failures, your weaknesses, criticism that you receive on the job. All of these questions are getting at the same kind of anecdote or story, where the interviewer wants to talk about what your weaknesses are or how you can improve, areas of growth for you. And so you can see that while these questions are all different and they're asking different questions, the heart of the response is the same. And so that's why I find that the strategy is really helpful, and it's sort of the best way to prepare for a qualitative interview. It's to find 5 or 6 anecdotes in your prior work experiences or school experiences that can help you navigate and be flexible around all these qualitative questions. Another key point is don't jump around from point to point. You want to start with somewhat of a structure, within a minute, quick intro on the main idea that you want to discuss. You want to get into the story, and then you want to summarize and kind of wrap up and conclude all within a minute. And so this is kind of a guiding structure that I've presented here. 15 seconds, you start with kind of the main point or the highlight of the story. I had a conflict with a coworker. You tell the story, why you had the conflict with the worker. We disagreed on, how to best implement, a marketing strategy. And this is how I handled it. I sat down with him over coffee, and we discussed, what our goals were, blah, blah, blah. And then you kind of summarize, we got on the same page, and then you kind of wrap it up and conclude in the last 10 to 15 seconds. With the exception of tell me about yourself, or the walk me through your resume, which are kind of the same questions, most fit or behavioral questions should be answered within a minute. So key questions that you typically get in an interview process, and these are kind of, if I had to boil it down, these are like the three big questions that that I wanted to kind of go into a little bit deeper and talk through. It's tell me about yourself, walk me through your resume. You'll always almost certainly get that question. Why do you want to work in XYZ industry? And why do you want to work at XYZ firm or company? So tell me about yourself. Walk me through your resume. This is something that almost all of you will get asked, if not all of you. And it's important that this is something that you rehearse and really take the time to hone in and practice, because it's likely going to be the first question you receive, and it's going to set the stage and set the impression for really the rest of the interview based on how you answer this question. Similar to how in a job application, the resume is the first piece of information that a recruiter will have on you. In an interview, this is going to be your first response. And so it's very important to nail this and be as clear and concise and structured as you possibly can be. So rehearsing, saying it in front of the mirror, recording yourself if you're going to be doing a Zoom interview, and watching it back on video are great strategies to practice this and make sure that you have this answer down pat. Best practices on how to go about answering this question. Be chronological, right? You don't want to jump from time to, backwards and forwards, because it becomes hard for the interviewer to follow along. You want to start with where you grew up, your hometown, a little bit about your background, be a little bit personal, maybe throw in a joke, and then go into, what you've studied or your education experience to date. And then from there, go into your work experience and chronologically walk through, everything you've done, whether it be internships, if you're a new college student or a recent graduate or a student, or your work experiences if you're more experienced in the workplace. You want to show how each experience you have today, whether it be school or work experience, has led you to this job opportunity. So for example, if you are trying to work at a hospital, and you have experiences shadowing doctors or doing internships at medical clinics, or doing research with a professor in university. All of these experiences, you can talk about how you went into them with the penultimate goal of reaching, the job that you're interviewing for. So you want to shape and mold your experiences and tie them together, so you can show that you've put in thought and deliberately tried to build up a path or trajectory to where you're trying to go. So, and sometimes they may not always be the intention, but it makes you sound a lot smarter if you're able to tie it all together. So put in thought in terms of how you can do that, even if they're unrelated. The skills that you picked up, whether it be leadership, teamwork, integrity, attention to detail, all of those can tie into a new role that you're trying to apply for. So even if the content isn't the same, you can tie skills together, but find a way to bring them all and connect them all. For this question, this is one of the few where you can go above a minute, I would say, and maybe 2 to 3 minutes is fine, because it's again, setting the stage for the rest of the interview. And you want to be able to go a little bit deeper into this question to give the interviewer an understanding of who you are. Obviously, vary your intonation, your delivery. You don't want to sound scripted, right? The worst thing you can do is sound like you just memorized a paragraph or two, and then you've come into the interview and just regurgitated it, ad lib. You want to be able to make it seem natural. So even though you will have all prepared this question, make it seem as you have it, vary your intonation, and try and make it kind of a little bit exciting and catchy and fun if you can. And then the last thing is speak with confidence, right? You want to make sure that you're coming across like you're confident in yourself, you're confident in your experience, and that you're eager and excited for this role, and that your experience to date has prepared you for this role that you're going for. Again, common mistakes that I typically see and that tend to happen with this question is you go, as I mentioned, out of order or chronologically. You want to make sure that you're, again, following a little bit of a structure. Too much exposition. This is something that people tend to do when they either haven't prepared or are nervous, which is completely fine, but you want to find, and this is where kind of rehearsing and practicing in front of a mirror or a video camera is helpful, where you want to get sort of what I like to call filler language or filler words out of your stories. I've had a lot of great experiences, or I really enjoyed my internship, or I learned a lot about, the industry in this internship, kind of filler words that you put in without actually diving into the content. Again, it's obvious that you've enjoyed your work experience today. You enjoy what you do. You're in that position today for a reason in terms of why you're interviewing, but you want to make sure you're able to get into real substantive content as opposed to kind of filler words. Being too short is another one, where you spend only 45 seconds and leave the interviewer wanting a little bit more, or you go ramble on for 5 minutes and it ends up being a little bit too long, and the interviewer will lose focus and get distracted just because you're talking a little bit too long. Not sounding certain for why you want this job, or why you want the job that you're applying for. It's something that's really important, and it comes through when you're talking about a certain role. You want to make sure that you're sounding excited and that the job that you're interviewing for is the be all end all for you. So you want to come across as kind of, excitable and a go-getter and really motivated, because that's what employers want to see. They want to see that you're as passionate about the job as they are. And then the last thing is kind of listing your experiences rather than giving sort of a logical transition or having what I like to call flow through your response. To give you an example, as I alluded to earlier with the medical example, you don't want to just say, oh, I did this internship, this internship, this internship, this research. You want to be able to talk through with a flow. So, I did this internship. I liked this about it. I didn't like this about it. And that's what forced me to look for something different in my next internship. And so talk about and tie these internships or experiences together with some sort of flow. And the best way to do that is talk about your learnings, what you liked or didn't like about the internship, and how, or the work experience, and how that informed your decision-making process for the next step or the next phase of your career development. So important to tie these things together rather than just simply listing off, experiences like you're checking items on a grocery list. So the next question that's super important that you're probably going to get is why do you want to work in XYZ industry? So for this question, it's important to have 2 or 3 reasons why you think the career choice or this job is right for you, why you want to move forward in this field. It shows that you've done your homework on the industry. It shows that you understand what the job entails. A lot of times it's shocking, but people don't read the job descriptions for the roles that they apply for, or at least it comes across as if they haven't. You want to make sure that you know what you're getting into, and that you know what any field entails, whether it be in the medical field or the legal field, etc. And a way you can do that is citing examples of people that you've spoken with at the company and leverage sort of unique differentiators that make a certain industry exciting to you. So case study here is a corporate lawyer, right? You can talk about the nature of the work, how supporting companies, when they're going through litigation or doing sort of, M&A deals, mergers and acquisition deals, or raising capital, any of these kind of events in a company's life cycle or trajectory that require, corporate lawyers to come on board and assist and provide advice is really exciting, because a lot of the times, when you're doing these kind of monumental transactions or activities as a company, you're at a key inflection point, right? These are big decisions. So you're there to support companies at sort of their biggest inflection points in their trajectory. So that's an exciting way, and that's a reason you could talk about how the nature of the work motivates you, and it's something that's appealing to you. The second thing you can talk about is the people you're going to be working with, because at the end of the day, employers want to see that you want to be with them and you want to learn from them and grow with them. So you can talk about how you'd have access to incredible people, both inside the law firm and outside the law firm, whether it be the lawyers that you're working with, senior people in the company, or clients of the firm, right? You'd be working with CEOs, CFOs, board members of these other companies. Again, this is flexible. This is just a lawyer example, but this could be, whether you're in the medical field with great doctors, or you're working in engineering, some great senior engineers. The ability to learn from the people you work with inside and outside the company is a great reason for why you'd want to join a certain industry. And then the last thing is personal development, right? Where you can talk about how in the law example, it's fast paced, where that allows for more learning and more chance to make an impact earlier on, relative to other positions where it's not as fast paced and you feel as though you have to wait a lot longer to make a meaningful impact in the day-to-day work. So you can talk about the growth opportunity or the development opportunity that exists for you at a specific industry. But this is how I would go about kind of the three buckets of answering, why you want to work in a certain industry, and trying to really hone in and understand, again, based on your prior experiences, how you're a good fit for whatever industry you're applying for. And then the last question, which is that I want to go into on this side is and it gets a little bit more specific, is why do you want to work at XYZ company, right? So again, this is a great way, as we talked about earlier, to leverage what you learn during your coffee chats and your networking and outreach efforts, right? Because in those conversations with people who work at the company, either in your role that you're applying for, or people who are more senior to you, you'll get a lot of tidbits of information about their day-to-day experience at the company, why they like it, why they don't like it. And those are key pieces of information that you can use to craft your answer and really sell why you're motivated and why you're excited to join the company. It shows that you've done a lot of effort, you've put in a lot of effort, you've done a lot of research, and that you're motivated to join. So you can talk about, for example, there's a we culture at the company, which means, everything's very team oriented, and that, there's a sort of a communal responsibility and accountability within the organization, and you like being in that environment. You talk about how the teams are very small and lean, and that's exciting to you because you get to work with people a lot closer and take on more responsibility, but also build a lot more meaningful relationships with the people that you work with. So that could be a reason. Something else is personal development, how you've talked to people in the company who've been there for 2, 3, 4 years, and they've grown a lot, and they've talked about their own personal development, and you want to experience that yourself. You could play across the spectrum here. There's pros and cons to being, as it relates to company size, a big firm, a big institutional firm. Think, a KPMG, an Ernst & Young, or a lean kind of boutique, smaller company that is lean and only is, maybe 5, 6 people. There are pros and cons to being in both environments. So obviously, based on the interview that you're in and the company you're applying for, you can flex that answer. But again, it shows that you've put in thought about the environment that you're going to be stepping into, and you've thought about the benefits and why that appeals to you, and that's important. Where you are within the company. So just to take the Ernst & Young example, you can be in accounting, you can be in consulting, you can be in tech. So why the group within that company is appealing to you, and what separates that opportunity for you versus all the others, as well as geography, if that's a factor. If you want to move to a new city, if you have family there, you can talk about why all those reasons are appealing. But again, this is a way for you to really showcase that you've done your work and you've done your research. A lot of times people view this question as, oh, let me talk about all the good things about the company and list off, all the great, kind of highlights that I saw on their website, or something like that. And that's great to do. But that isn't necessarily the goal of this answer. Again, you have to put on the lens of an interviewer. An interviewer wants to see that you've done that research, that you've done that outreach to people on the team, and you can really impress them by showing that you've had these conversations and that you've done the legwork to make connections in the company and already kind of build out some semblance of a network before you even got the job. It shows a lot of initiative and responsibility. And that's a great way to differentiate yourself. So again, use these, when you look at these questions or you're thinking through potential questions that you can get asked, think about the lens of an interviewer and what they're trying to get at. Because again, they know their company is great. They know what their company does and why they like it. They work there. They know more about the company than you do. So what they're really trying to get at is, how deep have you gone to understand the company and why it appeals to you and how it fits into your long-term goals. So it's important to always kind of flip that lens when you're preparing and think about the perspective of the interviewer. Bonus question is, and this is something that a lot of people have difficulty answering, so I thought I'd throw it in here as well. I got some feedback on this question earlier. It's, how do you talk about weaknesses and failure without going a bit overboard, right? Because it's a tough question to navigate through. Two important tips to remember with this, right? You want to give a real weakness. You don't want to say, oh, I work too hard or I care too much, because those are not real weaknesses, and any interviewer will know that it's probably not the reality in terms of what your biggest failure or biggest weakness is. You want to be legitimate. You want to talk through what they are, and also talk about, after you list them, how you're going about fixing that and how you're going about improving on that failure or on that weakness, and give literal examples in your day-to-day, whether it be in school or in work, how you're trying to fix that. So what are some examples of this? Communication. It's great. Everyone can improve on communication. It's something that across the board, everyone struggles with. Things get lost in translation. When you're working in teams, in big teams, it's tough to make sure that everyone's on the same page at all times. So that's a great example that you can use, where you weren't as communicated with the team as you should have been. And what were the consequences of that? Well, you missed out on a potential sale, or you missed out on a potential opportunity. How did you learn from it? Well, you put in place a strategy to communicate more, to update your team more, or have kind of weekly catch-ups to make sure that everyone's on the same page. Finding a way to articulate how you're trying to solve the problem. Another example is that you get lost in the details, or you fail to see the big picture. It's sort of the example where you need to separate the forest from the trees, right? And so maybe you were too impatient, or you didn't delegate tasks properly. This is something where, again, it ties back to communication, trying to understand the bigger picture motive for a company, especially when you're in a junior role. So these are all things you can talk about to try and, that are legitimate weaknesses, to try and articulate, what's gone wrong for you in the past and how are you trying to improve it. Some things not to say is you don't like people, you don't like working in teams, you don't like communicating with others. These are kind of deal breakers that you should not bring up. Or you don't like working, right? These are generally things that you don't want to bring up. So again, you don't want to be too blunt about what your weaknesses are. You want to be a little bit more crafty in terms of how you navigate and articulate it. So I thought I'd give you guys some quick tidbits on how to go about navigating this question. But it is something that a lot of times you will get in an interview process, just natural. So technical questions, right? This is kind of the next bucket of questions that you get. The best thing you can do is obviously preparation, right? And so, know what industry standard questions are asked. This will change based on what you're trying to get into, whether you're trying to work at a restaurant or a law firm or an accounting company, right? What you're going to be asked is likely going to be found online. So do research on Google, on Glassdoor, try and get examples from online forums where people talk about their interview experiences and the questions they received, because a lot of times you'll likely get those same questions. You could also ask the people that you've networked with who've already gotten the jobs that you're applying for. And again, this is how it all comes together, right? Where the networking can help and guide your interview preparation Or you can say, look, when you were applying for this role, 2 or 3 years ago, what type of questions did you get asked outside of as it relates to technical questions? How should I prepare? And they'd be able to help you navigate. There's also a ton of online guides and resources based on the industry that you're trying to apply for that can help you master what you need to know. An important thing to remember is that, getting technical questions won't land you the job. It's more of a check the box item, but not getting them right will almost certainly, or can certainly disqualify you if it shows you haven't put in the preparation or you just aren't qualified. So important things to remember around technical preparation. Again, additional tips, check the box item. So can't necessarily get you a job, but it can definitely hurt you if you don't know them. Know them cold, practice answering them out loud, because it shows that you have confidence in your responses. Especially, I find, even more so than the behavioral questions, it's important to practice the technical questions out loud, because this is stuff that's not natural to talk about. You don't typically have conversations on legal theory or accounting theory or math questions, right? You don't have natural conversations about this stuff. So being able to articulate the technical and navigate the technical questions in a confident manner just requires practice. Focus on understanding the why, right? Because if you just memorize answers from online, you don't actually understand the concepts that you're being asked about. If the interviewer double clicks or tries to prod on a certain question that they ask that's technical, you probably won't know, right? If you've just memorized sort of a script online. So try and understand deeper and go deep into whatever technical preparation you're doing, just in case the interviewer tries to grill you or double click on any specific subject. You want to obviously learn to deliver your answers with confidence, and then be calm, clear, and methodical in your explanation, right? Because again, this is going to show that you know what you're talking about and that you're qualified for the role. So we're ending a little bit early today, but I wanted to open it up for questions. Again, thank you for all being here, but happy to answer any question that you guys may have on interview preparation or any of our prior topics, whether it be resume building or networking. So happy to open that up. I think Sonia is going to handle.
Hi, sorry, I was trying to unmute myself.
No worries.
All right, so we do have some questions here, and I asked everyone to please type your questions into the Q&A tab. And thank you again for such an insightful webinar today, Laura. So let's get to the questions quickly. How can someone answer the questions, something about salary expectations? So I think that this could be a two-way question. So if someone asks you about salary expectations, how would you answer? And would you talk about salaries if they haven't mentioned it?
100%. This is something that's very important, and I would encourage you to not shy away from. Salary expectations are an important part, probably for many people, the most important part of any job experience or job process. So I guess the first context is, if you're asked about it, show that you've done research. Say, well, look, I've talked to recruiters, I've talked to people in the industry. These are the data points that I have, right? I have peers who have similar work experiences, working at similar companies, making X, Y, Z. Or I talked to recruiters who specialize in recruiting for, medical professionals in this space, and this is what they told me salary expectations are. And so I would expect something and give a range, right? So I would, based on the research I've done, I would expect something in, this range. So very important to be clear and show that you've done research for that. That's if you're asked the question. If it's not brought up, it's very natural and a-okay towards the end of an interview to say, by the way, when they open it up to questions to you, you can say, by the way, I was just wondering, what is salary guidance for this role? And this is the way you can say, well, I've done research and I've heard that it's kind of within, this band. within XYZ dollars based on peers and what recruiters have told me, but how much what are the salary ranges and what is the guidance for the specific role? It's something that's very natural, and you shouldn't shy away or sort of be shy to ask. It's very important, and make sure that you do your research, because if you don't, I mean, they could lowball you. They could give you a much lower number, and if you don't know what to compare that against, you're kind of just in the dark. So it's only as helpful as the amount of preparation and research that you do.
Thank you, Elnur. Next question is, for pre-recorded interviews, do you have any tips?
Yeah, I mean, so I've done them as well. And to be honest, I think in a way they're almost easier because you're not going to be put on the spot, right? If you're doing just a pre-recorded video interview. So again, the biggest thing I can give you is literally sit in front of a computer, open up the webcam app, the camera app, and record yourself, and then watch it back. See how you're coming across in a video, and actually being able to see that feedback yourself, analyze where you stumble, what you're not clear about, what's not coming across in the most concise manner, and then sending that around. Take that recording and send it to your friends, send it to your family, ask them to give you feedback as well. Those are really the best ways to prepare for pre-recorded interviews, because that's kind of the answer, right? It's not as if you're going to be put into a different situation when you actually go kind of prime time with it. So just practice and prepare and get feedback as much as you can on those recordings.
Next question is, how do you respond when employers ask you if you have any questions?
Yeah, I mean, well, you should definitely have questions, right? It shows, I think that's you'd be doing yourself a disservice by not having and preparing, that's a mouthful, preparing a list of questions for an interview, right? You could ask about, how they have liked the job to date, what their learning curve has been like as it relates to the day-to-day. A really interesting question that I find is great to ask is, how do you find the learning curve has been over time? When you're talking to an experienced interviewer, say they've been at a company for 5 years, typically you tend to see the learning curve plateau and flatten out, right? Because the more experienced you are, the less new learning that comes over time. So is it a job that keeps them on their toes and they feel that they're able to keep learning day to day, or do they find that after 2 or 3 years, it gets repetitive? And that's a way to get the interviewer talking about themselves and their own experiences, whether it be on the job learning or learning about how to deal with people, navigating teams, etc. So it's a great way to get the interviewer to talk about their own experiences. And again, people like to talk about themselves. So it's a great way to get the interviewer to open up a little bit and be a little bit more personable with you. So that's a great question. But again, always have a list of questions prepared. It doesn't look very good if you don't have those prepared.
Thank you so much, Elnur. Next question here is, how should we handle technical questions that you don't have experience with? You really don't know what they're asking you. How do you respond to them?
Yeah, and that's only natural. You're gonna be put in situations where you don't know the answers to everything, right? There's no way that's going to happen. So the first thing I would recommend is being calm. You don't want to seem flustered. You want to keep your composure. That's very important because it shows that you don't, inevitably when you come across, something that you don't know or aren't as familiar with, that you are able to remain calm and keep your composure. And then the second thing I would say is be upfront and clear. Say, look, I'm not too familiar with this concept or question. I think in my experience was more focused to XYZ and less on this field or this, these specific problems or technical type of questions. And so I'm happy to get back to you, with how I would, an answer. But so you be upfront. You say, I don't know it. You find a way to articulate that you're happy to kind of do the research and find out how to answer it, but then you still take a stab at it. You say, well, look, but this is how I would think about it. And you give it your best shot, right? The worst thing you can do is act like you know it and then get it completely wrong, right? Because that'll look even worse. So you just be upfront and you say, look, I don't know this. But if I had to give you an answer, this is how I would think about it. And then you try your absolute best to logically walk them through how you would deal with, that question or that problem. But being upfront and being clear that you haven't, come across this question before or this kind of problem before is the best way to navigate it.
Thank you. And then, the classic question, where do you see yourself in the next 5 years?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's something that you're going to get. I mean, I would say with this question, it depends on the job you're applying for. You want to make sure that you're able to fit you want to be able to kind of relate it to the job. For example, if you're applying for a junior position at a law company or something like that, you don't want to see, in Toronto, you don't want to see, I see myself owning my own business and trading crypto and living in Europe, like all these, like if you say stuff like that, or I want to be able to do XYZ, that's completely unrelated. It's just, they're going to be like, okay, so you're planning on leaving us in 3 or 4 years, right? Or you don't want to even be in Toronto long term. So make sure that you craft an answer that obviously relates to the job that you're applying for. And then you essentially look at, senior people who are at that company, where you talk about the responsibilities they have. So again, I want to be able to lead client interactions, right? Using the law example, I want to be able to lead client interactions. I want to be able to bring in business for the law company and handle my own projects. And I want to, establish a training program for, new lawyers in the field who are looking to build their career and kind of build out a more established way of training newcomers into the industry and taking on that leadership initiative, right? Like looking at people who are 5 years ahead of you, looking at the responsibilities they have and what the responsibilities that you have, and then bridging that gap and talk about how you want to be able to take all of that on in the next, couple of years. And that's really the best way to navigate it.
Thank you again. We'll take one last question here. Again, this is a very good question. How did you deal with a conflict or a difficult colleague who was not being helpful or just being difficult?
Yeah, again, so, similar to what we talked about earlier, where you want to be able to have, this is a question that you get all the time. I've got this question. You want to have a structure. So you spend, 15, 20 seconds talking quickly about the backstory. What's the one-liner, right? Well, a colleague and I were having a disagreement about how, we're going to go about, again, launching a product. Okay. We disagreed on the timeline and the strategy. He was focused on getting it out fast. I was focused on taking it slow, doing a little bit more research before product launch. Again, I'm making all this up. Eventually we sat down with our senior manager and we talked through what our goals were for the year and whether or not this was really that important to get out before year end or, beginning into the new year. And we came up with a strategy. I talked with him. I tried to reason with him, understanding, his or her motivation for wanting to get it done fast. And then quickly, spend 30 seconds on the problem and how you found a way to solve it. And then wrap up with your learnings, right? Well, I learned that, what did this teach me? Well, takeaways were, it's important to communicate with team members, especially when you're in a conflict, because that's really the only way that the conflict gets resolved. And B, it's important to try and empathize and understand the perspective or the motives behind, why colleagues want to make certain decisions versus what you want to do, and trying to kind of get to know people on a deeper level. And using that as a way to kind of bridge conflict or bridge disagreements. So again, starting with the one-liner for 10, 15 seconds, spend 30, 40 seconds on the problem and how you guys came to a solution. And then, spend 20 seconds on learnings and takeaways in terms of what you're going to do better next time and how this conflict or disagreement better prepared you to deal with it going forward.
Thank you so much, Elnor. Is there anything you'd like to add before I move on to my slides?
No, I think that's it. Again, thank you guys. Sonia, I guess she can reach out to Sonia if you need access to my email, but please feel free to email me with any questions you have. I'd be happy to try and get back to you and answer them. And thank you again for being here today. Really, really appreciate it and love speaking with all of you.